I hope Britain's immigration judges and lawyers can sleep at night if a foreign criminal, who they let stay in Britain, kills a load of people. Today in Germany, a deadly car attack happened. The man they've arrested is a 24-year-old Afghan failed asylum seeker with a history of drug offences. Here he is actually being detained.
Oh, shit. Okay.
At least 28 people were injured, some of them were young children, and one was apparently a child in their pram. That's the definition of innocence, that, isn't it? A child new into this world, being pushed along like that, potentially killed by a rabid Afghan asylum seeker who should never have been here. How many times? In the last year in Germany, there have been 5 terror attacks, all committed by asylum seekers. 3 of them have been Afghans, one's been Syrian, and one is a Saudi. It was just a couple of weeks ago, another Afghan stabbed a toddler and a man to death in a German park. Well, here in Britain, the public want illegal migrants deported, don't they? They want them sent home, even if it is to a war-torn country. They want foreign criminals booted out. The Tories wanted foreign criminals booted out. Reform want foreign criminals booted out. Labour say they want foreign criminals booted out, but judges keep letting them stay. The Pakistani paedophile with a penchant for prepubescent girls was allowed to stay so he could look after his own daughters. A migrant gangster who murdered someone couldn't be deported because of EU rules. We can't deport a Jamaican drug dealer because his child might be trans. A Jamaican rapist can't be deported because he might be bisexual, despite there being no evidence of him being bisexual. And we have yesterday's case of a Nigerian woman who failed 8 times to claim asylum in Britain. She joined a Nigerian terror group, which is not a prescribed terror group in Britain, which means she would face persecution back home. And in the last few minutes, I've come into possession of the Daily Telegraph's front page, which we're going to be talking about in more detail later. And I'll read this to you. Ghanaian wins right to stay after staging wedding he wasn't at. OK? A Ghanaian tourist was granted the right to live in Britain under Brexit marriage rules, even though she did not attend her own wedding. If so many of these cases, all right, the judges, they determine that the claimant is lying. They acknowledge in their verdict that they are being lied to by the claimant. And they still let them stay. What world are we living in? 1 in 13 people in London are here illegally. We let this Afghan nutjob with a Kalashnikov on his face come across the channel.
Mother!
We don't even know if he's been deported yet. Do you remember Abdulazidi, the Afghan who said that he converted to Christianity and was allowed to live in Britain before dousing a woman and a child in acid and throwing himself off a bridge? Interesting that he converted to Christianity because he did have a Muslim burial, by the way. But how do these lawyers who manufacture these claims sleep at night? And how do the judges who side in their favour sleep at night? If you don't deport these people, some of them can kill us. I mean, this happened outside Liverpool Maternity Hospital. Emad al-Swayalmin was a failed Syrian asylum seeker who we didn't deport, and he just blew himself up. He wanted to blow up as many women and babies as possible, but his bomb detonated too early for him. We've had an estimated 1,600 people cross the channel so far this year. We've got illegal immigrants in every major town and city just hanging around. We all know it. We all know this. It's a matter of time before one of them goes on a murderous rampage. And when they do, I will hold the immigration judges, the lawyers and our pathetic politicians responsible. Let's get thoughts on my panel this evening. We've got Conservative peer Lord Bailey, senior reporter at Guido Fawkes, Lee Wheatley, and we've also got former Labour Minister Bill Rummel. Sure, I mean, it's just every single day with these cases, isn't it? I'm just not quite sure how, especially the judges, sleep at night, because we're seeing time and time again them acknowledging in their summing up that they are being lied to, and they still seem to side in their favour.
I think there's 3 things to say. Firstly, I think these judges are in rarefied air, and it's an academic pursuit for them, and they're coming to these judgments. But I thought if you lied in court, you're in contempt of court. That should make it even easier to give a verdict in the right direction. Secondly, a system only works if people act within the spirit of it. And I think the legal system needs to be better at policing itself to find these lawyers and solicitors and whoever they are who are helping people game the system. And thirdly, we need to build a system that is significantly harder to game, because while it can be gamed, people will do so.
Yeah, now, the risk for me is, and I'm going to take you live to Germany in a few minutes' time, because there's been an awful attack there, as we were just hearing before. But the risk is that if you don't deport people who have failed their asylum claims, that they can go on and cause us some serious harm.
I mean, of course that's a risk. I mean, there's also a risk that people who haven't necessarily claimed asylum and who are just originally in the UK anyway could go on and do that too. For example, Axel Radikubana.
Yep.
But I think the important thing is that this is another example of human rights law undermining the British migration system. So in this particular case with this Nigerian woman, although the judge accepted that this was a manufactured sort of claim, under human rights, under the ECHR, she could not deport the woman back to Nigeria, because although the terrorist organisation wasn't prescribed a terrorist organisation in the UK, it is in Nigeria, so she was at risk. And the thing is, Starmer's said that this ruling was wrong. He's going to look at the law to change it, etc. He's not going to do that. He's a human rights lawyer. He's surrounded by human rights lawyers, like Lord Hermer, who just the other day was saying he will, the UK will never leave the ECHR. We will never go against any of its rulings. So they're not going to do that. And so this is just going to continue.
I want to see some investigations built into the judges, but also in the case of this Nigerian lady, into the lawyers, because she's tried and failed 8 times, I understand, right? And now, hey, maybe of her own volition, she figured out that there was a terror organisation in Nigeria that was not prescribed in this country, but would mean that she couldn't be deported back to them. Now, maybe she did off her own bat, or maybe she got a smart lawyer who told her that she could do that. I suspect it's the latter. And I think that's the problem. At what point do we have activist lawyers and judges?
Well, look, it's important we have a separation of powers between the government, parliament on the one hand and the judiciary on the other. It's what makes us a civilised society. When you get into the business of politicians deciding the outcomes of legal cases, you're on a very, very slippery slope. However, there are a number of really egregious examples that need tackling. This Nigerian woman, she'd applied 8 times. I think there should be a limit on the number of times you can apply. Well, maybe 2, because, an appeal.
Yeah.
But there ought to be a limit. After that, you can't apply. I think there are other tightening ups that need to take place. Now, the example this week where there was, I think, an egregious decision of the Ukrainian immigration scheme being used for Palestinians in Gaza is wrong. The government has rightly said it's going to close the legal loophole. I think other legal loopholes need to be tackled as well.
That legal loophole is part of Tony Blair's Human Rights Act. I mean, basically, Section 3 sort of gives judges the ability to reinterpret legislation just over vague constitutional rights.
I think we should stop pretending that that's a rational conclusion for that judge to have come to, because it's not. The irrational thing to do is interpret that legislation in the way that judge did it. Hugo Benedict Norton Taylor, by the way.
That's a problem. That's what's dragging now the judiciary onto the political plane. We need to be clear as politicians of what the rules are, so the judges can independently do that. We shouldn't leave wriggle room for them to be dragged into the politics. It'll only end in tears for everyone. But there's a deeper thing as well that's bothering me. Human rights law, the notion of human rights was effectively invented by the British. It is very useful. It is necessary. But all of these egregious cases are undermining other parts of human rights law that we actually need, and that's why we need to be careful what's going on there.
Let's come back. Ellie, you've just said that, it's the Tony Blair Human Rights Act. What the Human Rights Act did was to bring the ECHR into British law so that these cases could be tried within British courts. I think that was the right thing to do. I think it was a good thing. But other countries who are signatories to the ECHR put in place guidelines, codification of the way that the ECHR is applied in a way that we have not under successive governments in this country, and that needs to change.
What's the wrong thing to do then?
But the thing, Well, again,
No.
just because we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail, but I'll bring up the Telegraph's front page, because Ghanaian wins right to stay after staging a wedding that she wasn't at. She's called Francisca Boateng. She's 42. She's just won her immigration appeal after claiming that her proxy marriage to a German citizen who was living in Britain had lasted long enough to qualify for her leave to remain. Now, my understanding at first glance of this story is it lasted less than 15 months, and she instituted divorce proceedings, which concluded in January 2022. But, yeah, I mean, there was some proxy wedding that took place. She wasn't at this wedding. I mean,
How do you get married?
But that's fraud.
There?
I mean, that's fraud. That's an abuse of the system.
But it's not, Bill, because the judges have let her stay. And the only logical conclusion I can come to here is that in order for you to do that, you have to be an activist judge.
Yeah.
How can you do that?
Well, they all, especially these human rights lawyers. I mean,
I think the other piece as well. The law is based on rules, and everybody signs up to the rules. We need a judiciary that is a bit more alive to the fact that people like to game the system. Because, look, I wasn't there. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that looks like a very strong game that's been played there. And it would have been great if the judge could have spotted it.
Yeah. Can I just move us on? Because we are going to be talking a little bit about what was happening in Munich. Devastating event, or attack, really, isn't it? It's a failed Afghan asylum seeker, believed to be 24 years old, known to authorities. It's that word phrase again, isn't it? Known to authorities. How many times do we hear that? Has careered a car through a group of people, injuring 28 of them. One of them, apparently, in a very serious way, is a baby in a pram. It's awful. But, yeah, this is not the example, Ellie. If someone fails their asylum, like we keep talking about here now, you know, it's all very well and good. I say it's all well and good. You know, a woman from Nigeria who's probably not actually a member of a terrorist organisation just staying here. But some of these people can be very dangerous individuals. Germany didn't get rid of that guy. And look at what he's done. Is that not why we have to get rid of people?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the reasons. But another reason is the waste of taxpayers' money, waste of time. I mean, she's 8 times. I mean, and basically, you can reappeal every time there's new evidence. Yeah. And it just goes on and on and on.
That's where there needs to be a limit. But look, everyone wants people who have failed their asylum claims to be removed from the country. And I know you don't want to hear it, but actually, the fact that we're 30% up on deportation under this government, an 8-year high, is evidence that we're beginning to repair what's a broken...
We are paying...
No, we're not paying all of them.
But here's the thing. I commend the government for being 30% up. Let's be very clear. Everything the Tories tried to do to remove people, Labour were very busy stopping. So that might be why you're doing it a little bit better.
I'll tell you what, Sean, let's deal with actual...
And the other piece, the other piece as well, why deportations are important is for 2 reasons. We have been very bad in this country. We've mixed people appealing for asylum and economic migrants. We've mixed them together.
We haven't mixed them together.
We have. We talk about them. We use those 2 words interchangeably all of the time. That's why the numbers so huge. And most of those people are not appealing here for asylum. They're economic migrants.
That's because they're trying to abuse the system.
And we've allowed them to use that term. We should, if we deported people, right, we would be clearer to everybody outside. You can't just come here and start the game.
Sean, with respect, that's nonsense. We have not merged economic migrants with asylum seekers. Those are spurious claims that are put forward by people who want to come here for economic reasons, who are trying to use the asylum system.
And politicians, we make those words into we all talk about, you know, hundreds of thousands of people who are seeking asylum. They're not asylum seekers; they're economic migrants. And if we viewed them in that way, we would deal with them very differently. We would deal with them very differently. People who genuinely need asylum, this country has a proud history of helping people need asylum. The confusion's come because we've mixed the 2 terms.
Well, what doesn't help us, Sean, is making blanket statements like that all asylum seekers are economic migrants.
I didn't say all of them.
That's what I just heard you say.
I never used the word all once. I never, ever used the word all once. I didn't. The point is, we've mixed all these things together.
We haven't mixed it. You are welcome here if you're an asylum seeker, and either we assess your claim to be valid or it's not.
Loads of people who are just economic migrants are claiming asylum. I think that's the point.
Yeah, absolutely right. But we haven't merged those classifications.
We have.
Okay. Well, Ali, just round off with you on this. I mean, I don't quite get how some of these judges can sleep at night with the risk hanging over their head that some of these people, when they've interpreted the law in what is in a very unusual way, could go on and commit attacks here, or they allow people who are criminals, who are dangerous, to stay in Britain. Do How do they deal with that mentally? Because I couldn't.
I agree. I couldn't either. But these judges are so self-righteous. They genuinely believe that they are above everyone else. That these human rights lawyers are just basically all about following the law and what they interpret as, the human rights law. And I think they basically don't see the
I think
the consequences, Bill. Do you worry about the consequences if there's an attack? Because we're going to hear. Look, I do say, and I regret to say this, I think it's a matter of when, not if, and we're seeing things bubbling away under the surface. We do keep hearing numerous different reports about people hanging around outside schools, etc., which is horrific. And how do you expect the British public to react when this happens? And it turns out that someone's been allowed to stay in Britain, and we're trying to deport them, and we couldn't deport them. And how do the British public react?
I do worry about that. I really worry about it. But that's why we need to fix the system, and the system was broken. And I don't think, with respect, that just bashing lawyers is the solution to this. You need to change the rules.
Yeah, on the law.
Do you worry that people will kick off?
I was very clear about in the beginning. Of course, you need to change rules. Lawyers are responding to the system that they get. We need to be much more clear about what that system is. I do feel that in the past we have trusted our judiciary, and that's why we gave them so much leeway. And in order to maintain that trust, I think the judiciary are going to have to look at the weaknesses in the system for themselves. It will take time for it to go through our system, through Parliament, etc. We may get there, but the legal system could police itself far better by making sure within its own circles that people are not gaming the system.
There's one other specific change, that Nigerian case. That woman was allowed to join a political group after her case had been refused. We need to change the rules so that you're not allowed to take actions when your case has failed that reinforce your case.
Shackled to the ECHR, which basically states if that person's at risk, you can't put
we're not shackled, it's the application, and we need to fix that.
Just because we're going to have to whiz on and say, but just last year, I think there's something quite interesting happening in Britain at the moment, which is that positions that you used to have, and rightly so, great level of respect attached to them. So that was your doctor, your GP, being a judge, being a lawyer, I think being a teacher and an educator. I feel as though now we're going through a phase in British society where we're actually really starting to question a lot of those people, a lot of their motivations. And I worry about what that means for the fabric of society if now the general attitude is, well, the judiciary's biased and, GPs and doctors might not always necessarily have your best interests in heart, and lawyers are maybe a bit crooked and all of this stuff. It does say a lot that could go wrong in Britain at the fabric of society. But anyway, we can return to that later.